Larry Bird was a tenacious competitor. What did you discover about him in your findings that led to him his tenacity?
Well, my new book, Heartland, coming out this week, chronicles the story of the rise of Larry Bird in rural Indiana in the 1970s and the story of his unlikely, impossible 1979 Miracle Indiana State team. And, in that little window of time in which my narrative takes place between 1973 and 1979, Larry Bird faces great adversity. He is not considered a top 15 player in the state of Indiana as a high school senior. He is not hotly recruited by national collegiate programs. Even after he enrolls at Indiana University and signs a scholarship offer with Bobby Knight, one of the great basketball coaches in America, he quits, drops out of school, returns to French Lick, and nearly disappears forever. And so, it is an incredible underdog story. And I do believe that there is an alternative universe out there where we never know Larry Bird's name, where he never escapes French Lick at all.
Now, was this a passion project of your own? How did you come about the subject matter?
Well, my last book was called Charlie Hustle. It was about the rise and fall of Pete Rose. And, during the reporting for that book, I had returned to my roots. I had returned to the Midwest. And, as I came out of that project, I was thinking about other Midwestern stories that we've overlooked over the years. And I, began to focus in on this one. I feel like, we've been telling the Larry Bird story the wrong way. Every time we tell that story, we end up doing the Bird Magic story together, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson together. And listen, I get why we do that. Both of these men, are going to play against each other, are going to create a generational rivalry, are going to save basketball together. But when you tell the story that way, you lose this underdog rural Indiana narrative. And that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go into these little towns in Indiana and tell this story that we've frankly forgotten or never knew at all.
You're in small town America. How when you interview people are often starstruck, but some people just know him as Larry. How did you find people in their reverence to his greatness?
No one in rural Indiana, where Larry grew up, is starstruck by Larry Bird. He grows up in West Baden Springs, in French Lick, Indiana, in Orange County, Indiana, down in the southwestern corner of the state. If you look at it on a map, you'll see, this is a remote place. It was especially remote in the 1970s when Bird was growing up there. And, to Bird's credit, he returns to French Lick and West Baden even after he's become a star and one of the highest paid players in America with the Boston Celtics. He lives in West Baden in the off season in the 1980s, and people would drive around and see Larry Bird, out running on the rural roads, exercising, working in the yard. They would play pickup basketball with him on the basketball courts that he built at his new house there. And so no one there was starstruck by Larry Bird.
He's a hometown hero. In getting to know him, some people say never meet your heroes. How was he when you met him in person? Was he who you thought he was, or is he what people described?
Good question. So, to be clear, Larry Bird elected not to participate with me for this book. I did not speak to him. I have not met him. I can't answer that question. But I've learned over the years as a journalist and as a historian that you can often get a more accurate portrait of a person by talking to 12, 15, 25, 100 people around that person than you can at times by talking to the person, him or herself. And I do believe, that I have done that here in this book, Heartland. And to be clear, as I indicated before, this is not just a story of Larry Bird. This is a story of a time, a team, a place, and there are many characters in this book who are significant to the story, and at times some of those characters, saved Larry Bird.
Who do you feel, because everyone always tries to take credit for someone else's greatness. Where one person try to take credit, or does everyone understand their role and their participation in who he became?
No one I spoke to tried to take credit for Larry Bird. I interviewed all of his head coaches who are still alive. I mean, his coaches in his childhood, at college. At times, some of those men did pull Larry Bird back from the brink at moments when he was about to slip away forever. But everybody knows. I mean, Larry Bird was a tremendous talent. And when Larry Bird was given opportunities in life, he did not squander them. He always made the most of his opportunities. And that, is why he became a success.
He had an innate ability to make those people around him better. It's one of those qualities of great leaders on the basketball court and off. Did you get that sense in speaking to his coaches?
Yeah, not just his coaches, but the guys who played with him. I interviewed almost everyone who played with him in the 1970s, and all of them agreed that he made them better. And the best story about that, comes from a scene in my new book, Heartland, that really has never been reported before. When Larry Bird was finally considering re-enrolling in college, he goes to play in a summer pickup game with members of the Indiana State basketball team in Terre Haute. And, I interviewed multiple people who were there that night. And one of them was a guy named Johnny Nelson. Johnny Nelson was a small guard, undersized, not a significant player on the Indiana State team. And he was put on Larry Bird's pickup team that night. And Johnny told me that he played like the best game of his life. And he drives home that night to Rockville, Indiana, thinking about how good he was, how good he is. But he knew, Johnny did, that it was Bird who had made him better. And by the time Johnny Nelson arrived back at his house in Rockville, Indiana, he told his father, "I think I've just played basketball tonight with the best player I've ever seen."
Early on in our development, there's like one thing about personalities, right? It seems like he had to overcome some self-doubt. Do you get that from the interviews, and what helped him move forward?
I don't know if it was self-doubt, but Bird did have to overcome a lot. I mean, he faced adversity after adversity in the early and mid 1970s. He grows up in Orange County, Indiana, one of the poorest counties in Indiana, in one of the poorest states in the country. He is living on the edge of poverty there. His father is struggling, in particular, struggling with alcoholism. Larry really takes refuge on the basketball court. He finds solace there. People would drive by on the main street in French Lick and West Baden in the 1970s and find Larry Bird out there on the court shooting. This is, how Larry forged himself. And when he faces adversity later and is thrown a lifeline by others, Larry latches onto it and pulls himself out.
What can a reader expect from this book?
Well, I think this is the Larry Bird story like it's never been told before. I believe it's more than just a sports story. I think, I'm personally not interested in writing straight sports books. I am drawn to sports stories that tell us something bigger and broader about ourselves. And I think that is what this story is. I think this is a compelling human narrative about a group of people who came together once long ago, did something miraculous, and how that miracle, still endures today.